We are in a renaissance of the traditional ARPG genre. Not talking about Dark Souls or anything like that, but the regular top-down Diablo 1 inspired games. In the past couple of years, we've had a few games come out that have had some pretty big numbers and attention tied to them, and I just want to take a look at that with you guys today and help you to decide which of these time-sucking vampires of games you should sell your soul to. Diablo 4 is a corporate product that was shat out by the product designers at the mega corporation of Activision Blizzard Microsoft. It was originally started by and worked on by the developers of Diablo 3, but in the aftermath of the California lawsuit and anyone with any remote talent at the company being afraid of getting caught doing some cube crawling or some Cosby Suite shenanigans, there was a mass exodus of any remote talent at the corporation, and it appears they took a handful of interns from World of Warcraft and slapped them on Diablo 4. Because this game was clearly finished by a bunch of interns who worked on World of Warcraft, who had never played an ARPG in their life, we have this hot mess of garbage MMO mechanics, fetch quests, crafting, open world trash slapped on and layered on top of a very, very rudimentary ARPG shell. Certain core mechanics that you may expect, like picking up and identifying loot, crafting loot, caring about your loot, storing your loot, are all missing or so rudimentary that it is a pain to interact with. Even over a half a year after its release, it is nearly unplayable for anyone who has any experience playing superior ARPGs. On the plus side, it does have very good audio and graphics, pretty much the only talent left at Blizzard, and a campaign. This is a $70 to $100 abomination that also includes a battle pass as well as tons of toxic microtransactions. If you have any taste in video games or self-respect, you will stop giving Blizzard money until they finally fire everyone that was in charge at Activision and start making good video games again. Cheers to that. All right, next up is Last Epoch. This game just released a week ago. This game is why I'm making this video. I like to describe it as half Diablo 3 and half Path of Exile, really combining the best parts of both of them, although missing some of the best parts as well. It's very easy to drop into. It's very self-explanatory. It has a built-in game guide, basically a built-in wiki that can teach you the game itself, what you want to do in the end game, and its path there is very self-explanatory, and it's not overwhelming whatsoever. There are 15 mastery classes, basically the same thing as an Ascendancy in Path of Exile, spread out over 5 different base classes, and each one has a handful of very viable and fun builds with a lot of variety. This game has the best-in-class UI and UX experience. It is gorgeous. There's a ton of quality life that I hope other games get, Path of Exile, and it is very self-evident that the developers came from a place of love and respect for the genre. On the Path of Exile side of things, the build variety, the item variety, the potential for skill expression as you play the game is much higher, in my opinion, than in Diablo 3. While your homegrown character from zero experience can be effective enough to get to the end game and start getting through it, it does encourage and inspire you to push through, learn the game systems, and come up with a stronger, more synergistic build to push to the higher difficulties in that end game. And this is what I feel is much more inspired by Path of Exile. There's a depth to the systems and an understanding required that really asks of the player, if you want to get to the end game, really high corruption, tier 4 Julra, and tier 4 dungeons in general. If you want to get there, it does ask of you to grind a little bit, get that loot. And I really think that that is the soul of an ARPG in the first place, is if you get everything just kind of given to you and it's just a time versus skill thing, and there's no real expression there, that's kind of the Diablo 3 side of things. Diablo 4 is just nothing. It's just a pile of garbage. And then Path of Exile is just extreme on the other end, really asking you to grind like crazy and study like crazy as well, whereas Last Epoch is this perfect balance in the middle that, unlike Path of Exile, I would actually very happily recommend the game to my friends because I know that I wouldn't have to hold their hand and spend tens of hours trying to teach them the game. Now, in terms of the downsides, the end game, as I said, is much more Rift and Greater Rift inspired at the moment. There's really only 2 things to do in the end game right now. That is to run dungeons / arena, I'm kind of putting them in the same category, as well as run monoliths. Monoliths are very, very similar to rifts in Diablo 3. You basically just keep pushing them, pushing higher corruption to get higher difficulty and more loot to drop. And then dungeons are just dungeons. There's only a few difficulty levels for the dungeon, but they are necessary for certain loot targets that you're going to go for. With that said, for someone who is a very deep ARPG veteran, you may run out of content kind of quickly, but for the 50, 100, or if you're a big grinder, 200 hours that you put into it, I think Last Epoch is an incredible value. The developers have showed that they really believe in the game and they're going to support it for long term. And they have a great roadmap, in my opinion, for supporting that game. So yeah, if you're not playing Last Epoch already, you should, if you're interested in the genre whatsoever. This is the one game that I would recommend to anyone if you're remotely interested in the genre. I think it takes the best parts of the best ARPGs that have ever been released and really made by people that respect the genre. All right, Path of Exile. I don't even know what I can say about this game that most people don't already know. It is, in my opinion, the best in class, possibly best ARPG that ever will be released in terms of overall scope, content, depth, everything that it could ask from the player. But it's kind of the EVE Online of ARPGs. This game is hard, complex, difficult, anything, brutal, unforgiving, but incredibly rewarding. It is overwhelming, intimidating. This is a game that every single friend that I've ever recommended it to, helped learn, has come to me and even asked to get into the game. I don't have a single friend anymore that has come to me and wanted to learn this game and has stuck with it. This game kind of inspires a type of person, let's just call them the Uber spreadsheet nerd. Whether it's through sheer time spent studying the wiki, grinding things, just willing to force yourself to get okay at the game and understand it, or you're just the Uber nerd that wants to write down every single thing and min-max to the extreme, or you are the toxic trader that likes to sit there and flip individual items on the market to the point where you have the equivalent of a few $100,000 RMT worth of currency in your stash. This game appeals to the type A's of the type A's of gamers. When the equivalent of a game's tutorial in terms of the knowledge ends after a few hundred hours, you can't really have a casual Path of Exile player. We've all seen those kind of clips of someone opening up the game. The first time they level up, they open up the skill tree and they get overwhelmed and they turn off the game. I think that is perfectly indicative of the type of player that may or may not like the game. I could go on and on about how this game has 10 years of content. In terms of things that you can do in the end game, we have Incursion, Betrayal, Delve. You have 7 different pinnacle bosses that can also be Uber bosses. There are dozens more bosses that are slightly below that level. There's essences, bestiary, shrines, talisman if you want to. You can run lab, you can sit in your hideout and flip items, you can craft, you can own half the entire economy by just creating your own Discord, encouraging everyone to go in there and then arm. Because of all of this, and because the game doesn't really teach itself whatsoever, Path of Exile is as intimidating as I tried to get across at the beginning. However, if any of this sounds appealing to you, if the idea of having hundreds of potential builds with hundreds of different skill gems, so much variety, so many different things to do, maybe start with Last Epoch. If Last Epoch is fun to you and you get into that, I think that's a beautiful stepping stone for getting into PoE, and you can play both games. And I think it's awesome that both games are out and we have a healthy competition with games inspiring each other. We're already seeing some changes potentially coming to Path of Exile inspired by Last Epoch, them kind of like forcing a little quality of life nudges towards Path of Exile. And then I want to call honorable mention here for D2R, which I'm actually going to say a good thing about Diablo, and Torchlight Infinite. D2R is a faithful recreation of the original Diablo 2 with some nice quality of life bonuses. They are starting to add a little bit of additional content. If you want to see kind of the grandfather of ARPGs, where it all came from, kind of the gold standard that Path of Exile very specifically was based on and what has inspired the modern ARPGs in general. D2R is a great game that was not made in-house by Blizzard, and that's why it's so good. I think that is worth checking out if you didn't play the original Diablo 2 or you want to go back to it. And then Torchlight Infinite is a very interesting anomaly in the ARPG space.
Sign of repentance.
Whoa, hold on here.
I repent. I can't believe I tolerated you people for 3 years.
It basically takes the extreme scaling and speed that you find in high-end Path of Exile builds, pressing one button and teleporting 1,000 times to the other side of the map, or just walking through a dungeon and everything exploding around you, takes that to the extreme in a way that probably no other ARPG will. They have a seasonal cycle that's been adding some pretty interesting content and league mechanics. However, it does come a little bit from the gacha side of things, and it has some of that monetization that I really don't support, as well as a very twee, cutesy anime style and campaign that is kind of a turnoff for a lot of people, as well as a mobile UI. So weirdly, it's a game that is clearly designed by people that know what they're doing. The actual core game design, the systems, are really good and really well designed and very impressive, actually. They clearly looked at Path of Exile and took a lot of ideas, like heavily inspired by, but they put together a game that's really cool. It is a game that is deserving of respect, at least in the game design. But because of its art style, its UI, and its monetization, it doesn't get as much attention as it otherwise could. All right, and then last up, we do have 2 ARPGs coming out this year that look really, really exciting. First up is Wicked Inside by the developers of Ori and the Blind Forest. I just saw this trailer last night. This game looks gorgeous. Everything looks hand-painted, handcrafted. The combat looks very Dark Souls-y. A lot of dodge rolling. And this looks like the direction a lot of things are going, like Path of Exile 2, which we'll talk about in a second. So this game looks really, really cool. Looks beautiful. I'll link the trailer below if you want to see it, if you haven't seen it yet. And next month is when the beta starts, and I'm going to try to get in that and play it. So you can subscribe here if you want to watch me check that out and give my thoughts. But yeah, this game looks gorgeous. Ori was such a good game. And then just more handcrafted, beautiful games out there, especially ARPGs, as we're in the renaissance of them, I think is awesome. Follow up to that, we do have Path of Exile 2. This will be coming out in June of this year, at least in the original beta. It's not going to be the entire full release, but it will be the beta for everyone to get into and start playing the game. I played this at ExileCon last year. It has a lot of potential. A lot of people like to talk about the graphics and sound of Diablo 4, which is very good, but playing Path of Exile 2 at ExileCon, I don't know if they had magical headphones or something, but that game sounded and looked so beautiful. I was genuinely very blown away. The combat style is kind of a turnoff currently for at least what they've shown in demos for a lot of PoE1 players. PoE1 is much more like Torchlight. It scales to a point where you're just teleporting around like crazy, blowing everything up, and that's kind of what turns on a lot of Path of Exile players, that and just really big spreadsheets with really big numbers. So what the game actually plays like when it comes out and, you know, what the combat style is going to be like is entirely up in the air. We don't know yet, but the game does look and feel really, really cool, and I'm excited for that coming out later this year. So yeah, that is ARPGs in 2024. That's where we're at right now. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I missed, or you know, maybe you're a big Diablo 4 fan and you got 300 grandchildren and you're here to tell me that this is the only game you can play and you have enough time for. So please comment below for some engagement. I would appreciate that. Anyway, that's it for me today. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for all the patrons and all of you guys for supporting me. And yeah, I'm going to boot up Last Epoch and probably just keep grinding some loot for my Falconer.